Well, sure, Chair Joe Moody and members of the Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence, thanks for the invitation to be here and say a few words. I wish I could be there. It's much more effective, and Austin is one of my favorite cities. I apologize for not having prepared remarks. I'm on a book tour. I don't work that much, but I'm working this time of the year when I publish, so I've been on a lot of airplanes, and I just got to New York, and so I'll just ramble for a few minutes and then take some questions. I sort of know what you're doing because years ago I was a member of the House Judiciary Committee in the Mississippi House of Representatives, and I had that for 2 terms, and we had a number of committee hearings, as you do. I don't miss any of them, so I sort of know what you're going through, what you're doing. But none of those hearings back then were nearly as important as this one right here. So it's my honor to be here to speak for Robert Roberson. I'm also honored to be here to offer a few words of great admiration to this committee for your actions last week. You literally saved an innocent man's life. You took a bold stand against injustice at the precise moment when the courts and the leaders of the state seemed hell-bent on executing Robert. If not for you, Robert would be in his grave today. Your actions were creative, to say the least, fascinating, unique, courageous, bipartisan, and heroic. And we all watched in disbelief last Thursday night, not just in Texas, but around the country, around the world. I've talked to journalists in Europe the past few days doing book stuff, and they are fascinated by this case and by the actions that this committee took last week. So you chose to dig deep and to find the truth and recognize that Robert's life was worth fighting for. So I'm honored to be here to meet you. Robert doesn't need me to speak for himself. He has as you know by now, a great legal team made up of lawyers from Texas, Washington, and New York, who have worked for many years to prove his innocence. One of those lawyers is a friend of mine in Washington, and about 8 months ago, he asked me to take a look at the case with the idea of perhaps writing an op-ed piece for a major newspaper. And I said, sure. I've been on the board of the Innocence Project in New York for a long, long time. And for the past 15 years or so, we have been more and more concerned about the shaken baby syndrome, shaken baby convictions. It's something we have studied. So I was somewhat familiar with that problem. And I said, sure, I'll take a look. My understanding is that last week you guys you committee members got a lot of testimony about the medical and scientific evidence now available that proves that Nikki did not die because she was shaken to death by anyone. She died because of viral pneumonia, and we can prove that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer. And I practiced criminal law in a small town in Mississippi for 10 years. And I had a lot of cases, a lot of clients, a lot of jury trials. I tried over 100 jury trials in 10 years. And I came to really respect the idea. We just believed in the idea of a fair trial. We still do. All Americans believe in the idea of a fair trial. We at least pay lip service to that. And I never had a client in 10 years I thought was wrongfully convicted. I knew the judges, the prosecutors, the policemen, the game was played fairly. And I just never thought about wrongful convictions until I'd written probably 20 books, and I saw this case that out of Oklahoma that fascinated me about a man my age who went to death row and came within 5 days of being executed. And so I wrote my first nonfiction book, The Innocent Man, published in 2006, about Ron Williamson and what happened to him. And it was a fascinating entry into the world of wrongful convictions. I have since become convinced that there are a lot of innocent people in prison, and that's why I do this work. That's why I get involved in these cases. As a lawyer, it always bothers me when I study a case like this and I realize how unfair the trial was. Because I've been in those courtrooms many times, and I know what it takes to have a fair trial. Robert's trial was grossly unfair. There was nothing aside from the junk science. The science was terrible. The science has been debunked and discredited and disproven now for the past 15 years. We know it's bad science. The science was terrible. The jury selection was awful. From the opening bell, the prosecutor was allowed to point a finger at Robert and call him a baby killer or whatever. That persisted throughout the trial until the closing argument. The absolute low point in the trial was when a ER nurse was allowed to testify that Nikki, who had been sick for her whole life, but really sick the week before she died, she'd had violent diarrhea, fevers, upset stomach, everything. A nurse was allowed to testify that she saw signs of sexual abuse looking at the child's anus, and there was no allegation of sexual abuse anywhere. It was not proven by the autopsy. There was nothing there, but she was allowed to testify. When I was the defense lawyers, to their credit, objected. When I was a lawyer, that would have been grounds for an automatic mistrial. There's no way a prosecutor could get by with that. In most courtrooms throughout the country, that's a mistrial. You stop right then and you say, stop it. And the jury goes home and you try again. That didn't happen. The judge waved it through, and the prosecutor was allowed to keep using the sexual abuse language even in his closing argument. The trial was a farce. It was a pathetic trial. And that's what I go back to in these cases. If we could go back and get a fair trial, and I think that's all Robert and his lawyers would love right now, is to get back into court, have the CCA declare a new trial. Let's go back to Palestine, Texas, to Anderson County, or maybe change venue, whatever. And let's have a legal team that Robert can have with as many lawyers as the prosecution, as many experts as the prosecution, as much money as the prosecution. Put the jury in the box, and let's have a fair trial. That's all we're asking for. I'll stop rambling now. I just listened to Dr. Phil, and I'm astonished at the amount of research he and his staff put together in preparation. It was truly remarkable. I'm not that well versed in the case. I've come to it lately, but I'll try to answer any questions you may have.